In 4.4, we're going to talk about the last of three main forms of quadratic equations, and this one is going to be factored form. So to start off, let's talk about what the general form of factored is for a quadratic. Factored form looks like this. Y equals a times x minus p times x minus q. And from here, similar to the other equations like vertex and standard form, there's some unique features to factored form. Like all the other equations, factored form clearly shows us what our a value is. In here, our a value is going to be the leading coefficient before any of the parentheses. Unique to factored form is going to be your x-intercepts, or as you might have called them in Algebra 1, zeros, where you cross the x-axis. Those points are going to be at the value p0 and q0, and if you graphed it, you'd see what you highlighted in yellow, where that parabola is crossing the x-axis. You might have 2 zeros, in some cases you might have 1, and in some cases you might not cross the x-axis at all. So in this problem, if I gave you an equation in factored form, and I asked what are the x-intercepts of that equation, here we have y equals 2 times x minus 3 times x plus 1. My x-intercepts would be at the coordinates 3, 0, and negative 1, 0. So what's important to note here is that if I see x minus 3, that means I have a 0 at positive 3, 0. Similarly, if I see x plus 1, that means I have a 0 at negative 1. Next thing we're going to talk about is how to go from each form. So if I want to go from factored form to standard form, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to FOIL. Standard form, as we talked about in the last video, it has no parentheses, no anything. It's basically all the terms multiplied and combined together. So if I want to go from factored to standard, I multiply everything out by FOILing, and then I combine like terms. On the other hand, if I want to go from standard to factored form, I need to factor my equation. So a common thing that we're going to work on is the AC method, so we'll talk about that in an example problem. So for example, let's say I have the equation f of x equals x squared minus x minus 20, and I want to find the x-intercepts. What I could do to get this into factored form, to be able to then see the x-intercepts, is use the AC method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get two numbers that multiply to give me my a and c value. A equals 1, b equals negative 1, c equals negative 20. I want two numbers that multiply to give me negative 20 and add to give me negative 1. So now I want to think, what are factors of negative 20? I could have 1 and 20, 2 and 10, and 4 and 5. Since I need the number to be multiplied to give me negative 20, I need one of those two factors to be negative. So let's say I tried 2 and negative 10, for example. 2 and negative 10 would multiply to give me negative 20. The only issue is that 2 plus negative 10 would give me negative 8. That's not what I want. I need negative 1. If I look down one lower, 5 and 4, their difference is 1, so that's probably going to work out. I'm going to make my 5 negative. 4 times negative 5 will in fact give me negative 20. And 4 plus negative 5 will give me negative 1, so I'm good to go there. So what I'm going to do from here, so I'm going to say f of x equals x plus 4, x minus 20. Now I'm in factored form, and my x-intercepts are negative 4, 0, and 20, 0. The last thing we're going to talk about today is FOILing, just a quick recap of that. Let's say I have the equation f of x equals negative 2 times x minus 8 times x minus 3, and I want to get it into standard form. So what I need to do is I need to multiply everything out because I don't want any parentheses. I want to multiply everything and combine like terms. So the only thing that I think would maybe trip people up is you see the negative 2 in front. What I would recommend doing is I want to FOIL everything first, and then I'm going to deal with that negative 2 in the very end. So when I FOIL, I'll go through it step by step. All right, f of x, -2, because again, I'm dealing with that later. FOIL, the f means I multiply my first terms. Outer, inner, and my last. -8 times -3 will give me positive 24. This is going to simplify, or combining the two terms in the middle. The -3 and -8 will give me -11x plus 24. Now, finally, I'm going to deal with that -2. I'm going to distribute it to everything. So I'm going to be left with f of x equals -2x squared plus 22x minus 48 and